What's going on, everybody? Teej back again with another video, and today I'm here with my Week 9 NFL Power Rankings, which I guess at the end of this week, that means we're officially halfway done with the season, which is crazy. Speaking of that, look forward this weekend. I will have my mid-season award predictions updated from what I did in my preseason. I also do want to get this out in front before we jump into these Power Rankings. I'm obviously putting this out and recording this on the day of NFL trade deadline. That goes down at 4 o'clock, so if there is, a major blockbuster deal and a player on the move, that is not baked into this, just in case you're seeing this maybe after 4 o'clock and you're like, hey, when is he going to talk about this? That will be, kind of added into next week's, power ranking equation. So no big trade talks. We will talk some of the moves that have been made leading up to this recording. But, if there is a major deal done right before 4 o'clock, that'll be something we talk about next week's power ranking. So apologize in advance, but let's go ahead and jump into it. Houston Texans, this whole bottom, ranking right here, 32 through 29, they all stay the same. They all lost. The Texans, 314 yards on the ground. They kind of lack that physicality and identity, especially on the defensive side. And Davis Mills is having a hard time moving the football right now. And, I feel it kind of sucked for Dameon Pierce because he's going to see a lot of 7 and 8 man boxes. Until they can find something to open up the passing attack. And, one of those names that might be moved to the deadline is Brandon Cooks. And if he is dealt, that air attack is just going to be, kind of a headache moving forward for Houston fans. The Lions, that's kind of a tough game to drop against Miami. The defense continues to be an issue. They actually just fired someone on their defensive staff who, worked with Aaron Glenn, that is their defensive coordinator when those two worked together in New Orleans. So that's unfortunate. And I'm a guy who sung the praises for Aaron Glenn. 2 years in a row now, I've kind of had him as a dark horse head coaching candidate. And yeah, it's just not come together all that well this season. Now, granted, do they need more talent on that side? Yeah, for sure. But you got to at least see the structure and the bones kind of put in place. And we haven't really seen that yet for Detroit. And, the offense, it's rolling in the first half. And, this is, that's why I had, Bryce Young as the number 1 overall pick, the Lions in my last mock draft. Go check it out if you didn't. But, with Jared Goff, there's limitations. He's rolling for the first half, and in the second half, they can't get, the plane off the runway. And, that on top of, turnover concerns, which were more of an issue last week, I suppose, what we just saw this past weekend. Yeah, you just got to move on from after this year. Then the Panthers, stayed tough with Atlanta. Now, granted, Atlanta, as a division leader, it's not like they're, Kansas City. They're not Buffalo or anything like that. But, dude, PJ Walker, this week was a little less accurate, right? Like the lower completion percentage, lower adjusted completion percentage, kind of a tough boneheaded turnover worthy play in the mix as well this week. But dude, he's been making some big plays. And last week he did it against those 2 high shells that Tampa runs. And dude, that last pass to DJ Moore, shout out to DJ Moore. I know he got the penalty for celebrating, but I think I would have done the exact same thing. Let's be honest with ourselves. He basically saw PJ scramble, kicked it into another gear, burnt 2 DBs, and reeled in a game-tying touchdown basically at the buzzer. That is unbelievably sick. So I'd probably take my helmet off. And you know what? Eddie Pinheiro make kicks because he also missed one in overtime too. So sure, the penalty sucks there, but DJ Moore, PJ Walker, it's been great to see, and kind of like what we'll talk about we were the Commanders, it's great to see this backup quarterback look at a number 1 wide receiver and treat him as such. So that's been kind of a nice change of pace there for Carolina. And again, we'll hit on that here in a minute with Washington. The Bears, they lost to Dallas. They are running the ball well, so you take your wins for what they are. And, it's a 20-point loss, but if not for the Micah Parsons, is he down? Is he not? He picked up the fumble and he scored. You could be looking at this as a 10 to 13-point game. Obviously, once you take that score off the board, who knows what Chicago does in response? Who knows how that game plays out the rest of the way? But this could look like a completely different game versus a 20-point loss. So I think the Bears are making some progress, but it'll be interesting to see what they do at the deadline. Obviously, sellers on Robert Quinn. So, yeah, the defense kind of takes a hit, especially in the pass rush department because of it. Jags down a couple spots, and, they're just kind of a rough team. Either they lose the Broncos, you have Trevor Lawrence and the chance to try to win it at the end of the game, and he throws a pick, which, great play from the Denver defender. But, yeah, man, it's just what you wanted to see from Trevor Lawrence. You've seen him in spots where it's like, okay, there he goes. This is when Lawrence has that moment where we all okay, there he is, superstar in the making, and then it just never happens. It's like he keeps getting put in the right spot, but then it's not necessarily from an organizational position, but kind of like those moments where you see a Joe Burrow, take down the Ravens, twice last year, and it's like, okay, changing of the hierarchy here in the AFC North. We just haven't really seen Lawrence come through in those spots yet for the Jags. So I still think they need to add one more wide receiver. Could use a little bit of a bump on the offensive line. Also, they trade James Robinson. That's an interesting move. So lots of ETN. He looked really good this weekend. And I think they're also a few pieces away on defense, too. I think this is a team that's basically one offseason away, which is tough because next offseason they're going to be over the cap. So it'll be interesting to see, probably cutting a Shaq Griffin, cutting a Rayshon Jenkins. But we'll talk about all that once we get into my offseason content. Then the Steelers, that game played out just like I expected. The Eagles are just by far and away a far superior team, and the biggest mismatch in that game was A.J. Brown against whoever was going to be defending him, and Philadelphia did not disappoint. We'll talk about the Eagles later on. And, from a Steelers standpoint, you got to invest in the secondary, and, a ton of pressure put on Kenny Pickett. You got to invest at left tackle. You look at the PFF grades for the O-line, and outside of Dan Moore, it's actually not bad. And, I have really been negative and critical of Chukwuma Okorafor. Now, I think part of the reason his grade is okay is because the system itself, Matt Canada, utilizes a lot of motion. And he's doing little things to try to keep them look a little better. But, Chukwuma Okorafor, sure, maybe he's getting a little bit better. But even if you like Dan Moore, this team's got to go draft a left tackle or go sign a veteran guy there and be a bookend there. And maybe if you do like Dan Moore and you're kind of in my boat where I'm still a little skeptical of Chukwuma Okorafor in that production, maybe Dan Moore in year 3 kind of takes that step forward and becomes the right tackle of the future. But, they got to get better at corner. They got to get better at left tackle. It's just, this team's not going to really fully hit its potential until then. Let me get to the Washington Commanders. And again, Taylor Heineke is just playing YOLO ball when he needs to with Terry McLaurin. And I actually live bet this one on that right before that last drive, plus 490. So blessings to Taylor Heineke for hitting your boys some cash there. But Terry McLaurin's a dog. So kind of like we talked about with PJ Walker and DJ Moore, just like trusting a number 1 wide receiver to be an animal. And that they were. I mean, T-Mac made that catch over Stephon Gilmore. Like, that's no scrub he did that against. So from that standpoint, awesome. Shout out to Taylor Heineke. But that being said, they won this game 17-16 against a disappointing Indianapolis Colts team. It's not like they're going to the Super Bowl. So they are 4-4, which, there's a 4-4 team in my top 8, which, that begs the question, why are they so high? Why is Washington so low? The NFC East right now is kind of the NFC beast, but I do think a lot of those teams are going to start regressing. Washington, it's nice that they're at 500, but especially with Taylor Heineke, I think that kind of comes down to the mean. I think the Giants are going to regress to the mean. I think the Cowboys eventually probably hit a bump in the road. We'll see. That defense is legit, so that might, deter, the usual late season kind of disappointment that, is always surrounding Dallas, but we'll see. But, hey, Washington, kudos to y'all. I would not have envisioned y'all being 4-4, especially with Taylor Heineke being the guy under center. But, hey, trust Terry McLaurin and trust that pass rush. And they're only going to get better once they get Chase Young. Then we got the Broncos. They win in London. Congratulations. Good win. The defense looks solid. And, that defense continues to be one of the best units in football. Either side of the ball, that side is fantastic. It'll be interesting to see what Denver does with Bradley Chubb. That could be one of those names that gets dealt today. That's like, okay, bit of a change in the Denver trajectory, but also whoever lands Chubb, are they, legitimate contenders? So we'll have to wait and see there. Still things figure out on the offensive side. It was good to see Jerry Jeudy find the end zone. So, we'll see. Maybe another week of, recovery for Russell Wilson. Maybe he's that much better next week. I don't know. He's still just his corny self, though, in my opinion. But anyways, let's move on to the top 24. Cleveland Browns, another team that won me a lot of money. Shout out Nick Chubb. He did what I needed him to do last night. So win on Monday Night Football. I think, it's 5 straight wins against the Bengals. That's just kind of almost like, another game we'll talk about later on, the 49ers and Rams. There's just certain division matchups that just do not bode well for some sides. And I think the Browns just always have that hand up on the Bengals because they can control the rock, control the clock, and they can pound it. And, no DJ Reed in this game. Absence looms large. And it's one of those things where I think Cincy actually did a decent job early in the game, slowing down Chubb in that rushing attack. But kind of like the Titans, what they can do with Derrick Henry. By the time you get to the second half, the dude's just a train. Like, he's going to run through you, and you're going to eventually run out of the steam and gusto and energy needed to try to slow him down. So, yeah, congratulations to the Browns. They basically just, eventually they won a war of attrition against the Bengals last night, and with Cincy without Jamar Chase, that's kind of an apt play style to go against the Bengals with. The Colts down a spot. They lost the Commanders. Not sure why are they not flipped. We're 8+ weeks into the season. Take it as a full resume. Sam Ehlinger is an interesting, kind of a different component there to that offense. And there was multiple plays where it's like, yeah, you're definitely not going to get that with Matt Ryan, his escapability, his ability to use his legs. But I was calling it the Spunk Bowl. Some people called it the Moxie Bowl between Heineke and Ehlinger for a good reason, because that's kind of the biggest trait that you can put the feather in these guys' caps, and yeah, it's just going to be tough moving forward. Now, that being said, Ellinger, one of his best throws was completely through the hands of, Michael Pittman Jr. as he's trying to make, that last-minute drive. So that's disappointing. It just, a team that's just not firing all cylinders, and also another team that, got to figure out that left tackle spot. Love to see them add another corner. If they are buyers at the deadline, get a guy opposite of Stephon Gilmore. That'd be a nice add. They could still need more pass rush. So there's a lot to like, and obviously no Shaq Leonard too, so that's a dynamic playmaker off of the, that side of the ball. So that's frustrating. That's tough as a Colts fan, but just a team that's not meeting expectations right now. The Cardinals, another team that for some people kind of in that same boat, and this past week hung tough with Minnesota and DeAndre Hopkins. It's clear how big of an impact he can have in the game. Like, we all knew that, but like, wrong side of 30, he can still have that type of performance. And single-handedly was the reason the Cardinals offense was moving the ball and keeping them in the game. So big plus there for the Cardinals and Arizona fans. Now, can they try to do more, get him some help, get more Robbie Anderson, maybe when Hollywood Brown's back, maybe that opens it up. But right now it's DeAndre Hopkins, and they're having a hard time finding everything else, which is tough, but at least you have DeAndre Hopkins back. And then the defense, just not enough playmakers. Like, the secondary, like, there's pieces across, like J.J. Watt still plays good, but he's kind of the only thing that you really like on the interior defensive line. Zach Allen's solid, but, those guys get to the quarterback, and then it's like, okay, what's this edge situation? Isaiah Simmons come up with a couple nice plays, but still feels like a guy that, the top 10 pick, type of expectations. I'm not sure he's living up to that. And Zayvon Collins, where's he been? And then, Byron Murphy, Budda Baker, those guys are good, but it's just still not enough. And would have won a lot of money with this game. Justin Jefferson 2 yards away from having my D-Hop and JJ parlay hit. But nonetheless, so kudos to the Cardinals. You were just good enough to spoil me some money. But yeah, getting back to the serious point of this, but the Cardinals just, they're just not a great football team. And part of it's too, like Cliff Kingsbury, like, I think it was a fourth down where the play clock was running out for Minnesota, and then he called a timeout. It was Minnesota ball. They looked like they were about to go for it on fourth down. Clock's running out, and then he calls the timeout. Like, what are you doing, Cliff? Let him take a delay game and force the punt, or what are we doing here? So it's just kind of a bewildering team and a bewildering situation in Arizona. Falcons up a couple spots. Again, hung tough, and won a gritty NFC South game against the Panthers and found just enough plays. Yeah, sure, they could have lost that game at a couple different points as well. But if there's a team that's not named Tampa Bay that's going to lead the NFC South, I'm glad to see Atlanta Falcons, because that offense can be fun to watch. So be interesting to see, this Ritter-Mariota situation, especially as the division leaders, that makes it that much harder to kind of turn it over to the rookie quarterback and a backup. So maybe a lot more Marcus Mariota in our futures. Raiders and Saints switch spots. I mean, Derek Carr didn't cross the 50. Need I say more? I mean, geez, that is just so rough. The offensive line's a headache. They need more cornerback talent as well. But, I mean, when Derek Carr is not getting across the 50, the identity of this team is his passing attack and what it should be able to do with Carr, Adams, McDaniels. They just can't do it. So, yeah, this team's down bad right now. And, I mean, this team, I'm not sure Derek Carr's back next year. What do you do with Devontae Adams then? I just don't know, man. It's considering my excitement for the Raiders, even though I didn't pick them to win the division, I was still excited to see what this would all come together and look like. Another team that right here in like the low 20s, just a myriad of disappointing teams. Then the Saints, nice showing, good win. The defense over the last couple of weeks is starting to feel like the defense I thought they would be coming into the season. And now hopefully once they add more of those playmakers back on the offensive side, they can fully hit their stride. Great to see Kamara find the end zone. It was finally an Alvin Kamara type of performance we had to see this weekend. So that's a huge step in the right direction. So hopefully get healthy in the offense. The defense can maintain that level of play. And again, the NFC South's wide open. I mean, they're certainly still in it. And then speaking of the NFC South, the Buccaneers lost on Thursday night to the Ravens. Devin White was attacked. He was put on a wanted poster, and the Ravens went right at him in the second half. And I mean, that was a 10-3 game at halftime with Tampa Bay up ahead. And the Ravens said, okay, well, how do we get back into this one? Let's attack Devin White. Let's exploit him for the problem that he is. And, there's been this huge conversation between people like, oh, well, Devin White's really good, but he doesn't grade well for PFF. But like, this was the game that, like, if you're like a big proponent of the PFF grades and their system, this was the game where kind of all was put on national spotlight. And yeah, Todd Bowles is barking at him on the sideline. He's over pursuing. Even I can tell you the details of this play exactly. Kenny Pickett's first passing touchdown is Najee Harris in a block and release. White thinks Harris is about to block, so he takes it as a green light to blitz. Harris releases. That's a wide open touchdown. First of the career for Kenny Pickett. Those are the type of plays that Devin White makes. And this year, sometimes like the Super Bowl run, a lot of those, 50-50 plays turn into turnovers and turn into points for the Tampa Bay offense. This year, that just hasn't been the case. He's been missing too much of those. He's been whiffing and giving up big plays. So yeah, I mean, that's why the Ravens won, because they attacked Devin White, which there's a lot of problems for Tampa Bay to figure out. And when Devin White's one of them, that is tough. And then the Packers, only down a spot because, look, the Buffalo Bills are, I don't want to say a league of their own, because Kansas City obviously played a close game with them just a couple games back. I think Philadelphia could hang close with them, but these two teams are in different area codes right now. So the Packers still need a lot to figure out. And, you got some couple big catches from Doubs and then Tor. I mean, you might be starting to figure out some things on the offensive side. And, Jair Alexander and that secondary, honestly, they held up their end of the bargain. It was really Devin Singletary who had the biggest play. Now, sure, Stephon Diggs had, that kind of wheel route shaped touchdown. He also had the big play over the top. Sure, Diggs was still a factor, but a lot of it early on was Devin Singletary. So they forced, kind of the front seven. And, this was a game where Devondre Campbell goes down, Quay Walker gets ejected. So they really attacked kind of the front seven of Green Bay in a lot of ways versus that secondary. And that's where I think the Green Bay defense is a little bit more susceptible. So shout out to Jair Alexander. Shout out to that secondary. I think they played overall mostly well against that type of a passing game. But, in a game where you lose Walker and Campbell, Singletary had a big one. And now let's move on into the top 16. The Jets down a handful of spots. And, this team, if you were to say, gun to my head, say, who's the quarterback of the Jets next year? If you're wrong, you're dead. It's Jimmy Garoppolo to me. Like, that's what this team kind of, I think that's what they're going to opt for. Because you look at Zach Wilson and it's like, dude, they don't even need good quarterback play. They can get by with fine. And that's what Jimmy Garoppolo is. And Zach Wilson just, last couple of weeks, man. It kind of started out good. He had a nice drive to start the game, and I was like, okay, that was, some of the best Zach Wilson I've seen since that fourth quarter against Pittsburgh. But that fourth quarter against Pittsburgh, 2 double-digit plus play drives, it's like that's still like the crowning achievement of his career, and that's kind of what we're holding on to. It's been rough, man. And the team right above them, the Patriots, they have a quarterback question to answer because Mac Jones looked brutal too. This 2021 draft class, quarterback class specific, is looking mighty rough right now, which is tough considering how much hype was around them. But outside of Zach Wilson, this Jets seems really, really good. So I look at next year and I'm like, dude, I think they're totally in on the Jimmy Garoppolo market. They get him for a 2-year deal. Let him just be a facilitator, get the ball out, limit turnovers, just be average. And our defense and run game will take us the rest of the way. So, that's kind of where I stand on the Jets right now. I don't think they have their franchise guy. I think they're going to move on from Wilson after this year, unless it changes. Obviously, still another half of the season left, so a lot can change. Then the Patriots, they won. That defense, Bill Belichick, they kind of won by their identity. But, Mac Jones that's rough. And honestly, if not for that pass interference roughing the passer against John Franklin Myers, that kind of swung the momentum of this game and got New England back into it. I could see a world where, in Bleacher Report's Connor Rogers said the same thing. I could see a world where if New England's trained out the half, Bailey Zappi's the guy coming out in the second half. I totally could have seen it. That speaks to how rough Mac Jones has been. So big questions there, but you do get a win. And another one of those division games where it feels like the Patriots just kind of always have that matchup advantage against the Jets. Then the Giants, coming off the loss to Seattle, who was kind of one of my big winners of this week. I'm just kind of all in on Seattle at this point. I just really think they're a fun team. Maybe I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but talking about the Giants, hey, look, this was the week where you didn't find enough. Like, they've been getting, this is why I said it's unsustainable. They're 7-2 or 6-2 now, but it's like they were winning games by single, score margins, wildcat touchdowns by Saquon Barkley to take the lead, 100+ yard rushing games from Daniel Jones. They were scrapping to find any and all ways to win games, and eventually you're just kind of run out of options. So I think this was just kind of the first of potentially many. I think that are going to be on the future for the Giants. So sorry, New York fans, but I do think it's going to be rough moving forward, and you're probably going to be sliding down this board relatively hard in the weeks to come. Rams down a spot. I just don't think they're a good matchup against San Francisco, and that offensive line's still rough, man. They have got to figure that out because, again, with an O-line that rough, the plane's just not going to get off the runway, and that's just kind of where I see this Rams team right now. I also think they need one more piece on the defensive side, get one more pass rusher in there, and then maybe that defense can take another step forward, and maybe that's the reason they win games. Seahawks, like I said, big winners, up 8 spots. Great to see DK Metcalf able to play in this game, and also, let's talk about Tyler Lockett, right? Like, unusually bad game, and then Geno Smith drops one in the cover 2, honey hole right up the sideline, and Lockett, you could see him staring that one in from, when you were watching on TV, no matter how big of a TV or how far away you're sitting from it, you saw Lockett's eyes tracking that one in, and, great, battling through adversity there for a veteran, Tyler Lockett. Then he's got the quote after the game, it's amazing what we could do when, everyone's focused on us versus like trying to have an individual credit moment. So feels like a shot in the direction of Russell Wilson. But man, the Seahawks team, whether it's Russ gone or whatever, Pete Carroll's magic, this team is rolling right now. I know Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, those two have proven to be a pretty nice edge duo. So I think they need like a dude that like defenses or offenses are keying in on. But those two guys have played really well, and Boye Mafe week by week is becoming more and more of a factor. And then, the quarterback room's figuring itself out too, right? Like Tariq Woolen obviously gets a ton of attention, but Kobe Bryant, I'm just kind of optimistic about the Seattle team and the direction they're heading moving forward. But I think they have an offense, even this week with Geno Smith, where it's not like the most amazing game, it's still better than most of what we used to get from Geno. So it's one of those things where it's like, even down Geno is not what down Geno used to be. And I just think Kenneth Walker in that offense, they're able to run block. They've been able to keep Geno Smith clean in pass protection. That offensive line, all in all that to say, has been great this year, or really solid at least in my opinion. And I just think this is a Seattle team that is playing Pete Carroll football and doing it at a really high level. So they're up to 12. Dolphins up 3 spots. Look, this is a fun offense. Like Tua is the top graded single game performance in the PFF system this year. Like what? That's awesome. You have 100+ yards from Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. They go crazy. Dot to Mike Gesicki in the end zone. I mean, I also live bet them for plus money when they were trailing. Credit to their defense. As much as I do think the Lions offense kind of stalled out in the second half, part of that is DC Poyer, and I can't think of his first name off the top, but what their defense was able to do kind of slow down that Detroit offense, in the second half. So credit there to the coaching staff and the adjustments made there by the players as well. But man, that offense is just so hard to contain. And the Detroit defense is rough. I totally get that. But man, when Miami gets on a roll, it's just a Shanahan scheme. It's a locomotive running at full steam right at you. And it's like, do I get off the tracks? Do I stay on and have it come at me? So that's kind of the decision that Detroit had to make. Now, it is interesting going back to Detroit here and focusing more on them about this game than Miami. Dan Campbell after the game saying, we had to have hands on him. In pregame, there were quotes of Aaron Glenn saying, we got to be physical. We got to go get those guys, those wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. And that never happened. So it is interesting to see how this, coaching staff versus player personnel is going to play out throughout the rest of the season for Detroit. That's just something I'm going to continue to monitor. But the Dolphins are just a better team. I don't think they should have fallen behind, if we're being honest, in the beginning of the game. But they came back, won it, and the Dolphins offense, when they're rolling, is scary. Titans, but I'm stay put. They beat the number 32 team in these power rankings, so it's a win. But Malik Willis also is just rough, man. Like, I was excited to see this first start, but boy, oh boy, he just does not look ready. Like, he only attempted 10 passes, but at least on half of them, I was like, the throws should have been right there. And like, if I'm noticing that on my couch, and this may come as a surprise, but no years of NFL experience under my belt, but when NFL fan, somebody who takes this stuff as like an intense hobby, can watch a game and be like, the throw was supposed to be out right there. Robert Woods wide open. Yep. Okay. Now you waited too long. Now you got to throw it out of play. Okay. It's just like he's just not reading it fast enough right now. And they didn't really tap into his legs. They were kind of just using him as like a Tannehill clone. He's just not as good of a passer right now, or not as good of a processor as Ryan Tannehill is. But 314 yards on the ground. Derrick Henry 200+ yards, 10+ yards a carry for Dontrell Hilliard. Sometimes that's just good enough. So credit to the Titans. They kind of adapted. Once you got into the second quarter, it was like, we're gonna go ahead and just tote the rock here. We're gonna let our running backs win this game. So credit to Vrabel. I kind of had a feeling that was going to be something that changed pretty quickly, and that it did. Bengals down a few spots. I just think Cleveland, again, is just kind of a rough matchup for them. But, the absence of Jamar Chase loomed large. T. Higgins had the big touchdown. But other than that, it was, I think there were one point, it was like midway latter stages of the third quarter maybe, where he had 2 catches for 8 yards. Like, it was tough until that touchdown. And, credit to the Browns secondary, rotating coverage in his direction. And, because of that, Tyler Boyd had some big moments. But that's going to be the problem moving forward for the Bengals, is like, without Jamar Chase, defenses are going to roll over and play that much more attention to Higgins. And you let the slot guy do what he can do. But odds are, you slow down Higgins, you're going to slow down that offense just enough to make them not be Cincinnati that we know and made a Super Bowl run last year. So hopefully it's only a 4-week injury if you're a Bengals fan for Jamar Chase, because, man, that offense looks completely different. In the last couple of weeks, we finally saw it. So, the defense still, though, I think is doing, a solid enough job. Now, granted, last night missing DJ Reader, and as the game kind of progressed, that run game for Cleveland kind of wore them down. So, again, still think they're kind of missing that big, guy in the middle, and maybe they go ahead and add another veteran at the deadline just as insurance until Reader gets back. But even if something were to happen to Reader, they have that contingency policy in place. That would move wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. But I still think this is a legitimate team that just got to get healthy, basically. On to the top 8 now. Chargers, they were on a bye. Have them staying put. Same thing with Kansas City. Those are the only 2 teams on the bye. We'll talk about the Chiefs in a sec. 49ers up a couple spots. And, dude, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, if there was an offense to fully maximize his skill set, as much as I'm like, I gave that move a C because you gave up 4 draft picks, and for a team that could use secondary depth, could use a start on the interior offensive line, could use some help on the defensive line in regards to depth, like those picks would have served as valuable, cheap role players or starters. Dude, Christian McCaffrey, when he throws, runs, and catches a touchdown, it's hard to knock that move then. But I mean, the defense kind of got back on track as well, which was awesome to see. It was great to see that pass rush win a game that they should win. Like, this was a clear advantage of a matchup, that pass rush versus that offensive line for LA. So good to see that defense hold up their end of the bargain. And Christian McCaffrey, man. And they won this game without Debo. So, like, I am so excited to see when it's Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, CMC, all of them on the field. So Kyle Shanahan kind of has like this rough, I don't want to call it a tendency, but it kind of seems like, 1 week it's a Debo week, the next week it's a Kittle week, then maybe then it's a CMC week, playing out with the cards they have in their hand now. I kind of want to see it all come together. So I'm anxious to see if Shanahan can do that. Then at 7, Dallas. I mean, this team's just legit. I mean, Micah Parsons is such a fun show to watch that even the Chicago Bears had to stop and watch, and that led to 7 the other way. But jokes aside, guy's a freak. And I mean, the offense, we started to see it kind of kick into gear a little bit more. And let me make this clear: Jerry Jones can say it's Zeke's job all he wants. It needs to be Tony Pollard. It's just that extra burst. Zeke, and I'm not saying take Zeke out of the rotation, but like, unless you're looking for that pass protection, that's really the only clear edge Zeke gives you over Pollard. But I think the majority of touches should go with him. He just, again, gives you a little bit more explosiveness, gives you a little bit more burst, especially as a pass catcher. I tend to like guys who are a little bit more quick versus like lumbersome when they have the ball in their hands as a pass catcher. I just, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, the results speak for themselves. And again, not saying take Zeke out of the equation. Sometimes you're going to need short yardage, power back stuff, and that's where Zeke comes in. And, realistically, a nice 50-50 timeshare is really what you need as long as you're playing them in the right spot. So it'd be interesting to see how that rotation plays out moving forward. But another week back with Dak. CeeDee Lamb has a good showing. The defense is still fantastic. I mean, what more do you want me to say about this Dallas team? They're really, really good. And then 1 through 5 stays the same, right? Ravens went on Thursday night. Still not pretty, but I thought about switching them and the Cowboys. But I'll give them the respect that I think they deserve right now. I'll have them stay put at 5, but it's certainly close. Vikings won a close one against the Cardinals, but considering it wasn't a 3-point game, I'm kind of glad by the margin they won by. That's, not as close as it sometimes is with the Vikings, but nice balance of that offense. Dalvin Cook's a factor. Justin Jefferson's hard to defend. Like, the offense as a whole was hard for Arizona to account for, and they're getting just enough plays. Pat Pete in a revenge game played really well, and Cam Dantzler has been really, really solid so far this season. So I'm starting to feel better about that secondary. Zadarius Smith too, Danielle Hunter. They're getting enough edge rush production as well. Eagles, they blow out the Steelers. I mean, and one thing I did want to talk about here was I already talked about AJ Brown, biggest mismatch of that game, but I've also been a huge proponent of Jalen Hurts, and so I kind of want to take a small victory lap here. So deal with it for just 1 second, but all I've just said time and time again, all we've seen him do is get a little bit better year over year. And this year, that step forward was in the deep passing game. That was one of the concerns coming into the year was like, okay, sure, yeah, he's accurate enough in the underneath stuff, but what does he look like as an intermediate passer? And does he just rely on his legs? And can he actually throw the ball down the field? Well, this year, I at the end, if the season were to end today, I don't know what your concerns about Jalen Hurts would be. Like, I don't know what the talking point narratives would be, right? Other than the fact that it's like, I don't want to pay that guy $50 million a year, which that I can understand. But like, the second and third touchdown to AJ Brown were absolute dots. And like, again, the knock on Hurts was he can't throw the deep ball. You can't say that anymore. And now maybe part of that's just because, hey, that's his number one. He's got full confidence. But hey, that's why you go make a move for an AJ Brown like that. So it hurts right now. It's just balling. And, him and Josh Allen. Once we get to my midseason awards coming out this weekend, it's him and Allen as the MVP front runners, in my opinion. So really fun team to watch, and the defense is great. And, once you get more and more Robert Quinn in the rotation, I just think they're going to find another gear too from the edge spots. But yeah, it will be interesting to see Jordan Davis. How severe is that injury? But we still got Milton Williams, Javon Hargrave, who's tearing up his former team in Pittsburgh. Fletcher Cox is wrong side of 30, but still one of the better DTs in the league, so they'll be just fine. Chiefs on bye. They stay put at 2. They're still one of the best teams in football. And the Bills take care of business against Green Bay. And that was a game where it's 10.5 point spread and they cover, right? Like, that just validates how legit this team is. And Josh Allen can do some crazy stuff. Yeah, he had the 2 picks late, but he's so good, it legitimately doesn't matter, right? Like, some of the throws he was making are just unbelievable, right? So then you get the defensive performance at, Von Miller. Even he doesn't, I don't think he even had a registered sack in this game, but, Jordan Phillips, Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver had a couple of huge plays, especially in the first half, just getting into Rodgers' lap. Like, that pass rush in and of itself is just what makes the Bills go from a really good AFC team to me, the Super Bowl frontrunner. And it does help having the MVP frontrunner, and Josh Allen certainly goes a long way as well. But that is going to do it for my Week 9 NFL Power Rankings. Tell me what you think down below in the comment section. Where's your favorite team? Where do you think they should be? Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Love to hear your thoughts. It's a conversation down below. I respond to every comment, so let's talk about it down below. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It seriously would help me out a ton. Do you want to see more football content? Just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.